Your child's heading off to college. As parents, we hope we've taught them everything they need to know to be safe and successful. But there's a lot to cover. It was easier when they were little. As they become teenagers, we sometimes worry that they don't need or wouldn't listen to our guidance. But studies indicate that parents influence their teens' decisions about major choices. Take underage drinking, for example. Teens tell us that the #1 reason they choose not to drink is parent disapproval. When parents talk about the risks and consequences of alcohol use, teens are 50% less likely to drink. So as your child heads to college, they still need your guidance. Have you talked with them about alcohol, about sex, and about consent? The period from when you drop your child off for freshman orientation until they come home for Thanksgiving break is called the red zone on college campuses because it's the period with the highest risk of sexual victimization. From that first day on campus, your child has new freedoms, but they also have increased exposure to alcohol. And those two things together can be a volatile mix. So talk to them about alcohol and about consent so that they can make healthy decisions, stay safe, and start the school year off right. Parents influence their children's choices more than you may realize.
Sexual assault is non-consensual sexual contact. This can include kissing, touching of intimate areas, attempted or completed rape. So if sexual assault is about not having consent, then what is consent and what does it look like? Simply put, consent is an ongoing process of people agreeing to what they are doing together. And since it is an ongoing process, it can change at any point. Consent is the presence of a yes, not the absence of a no. Does this mean that it needs to be verbal? Absolutely not. However, relying solely on nonverbal cues can leave us open to misinterpreting our partner. So knowing verbal and nonverbal cues is extremely important. Sexual activity and consent to sexual activity at one point is not blanket consent to further sexual activity. So it is important that people check in often in order to make sure that sexual activity is still welcome. Don't worry, we will have links that explain consent and check-ins further in a fun and easy way. Alcohol affects consent. It has a myriad of effects on people who consume it, such as impaired decision-making skills and motor control. This can decrease the control someone is able to express over their body and boundaries, which means that they cannot be able to give consent. These same effects play out with a person pursuing a sexual act as well. The effects of alcohol can make it difficult for someone to interpret if their partner is giving consent, is unable to consent, or has changed consent. The effects of alcohol can also make it seem more acceptable to ignore someone's boundaries altogether. However, this does not mean that someone is not responsible for committing a crime just because they are under the influence. 90% of college rapes do involve alcohol use by either the victim or the assailant. Knowing our boundaries is empowering in terms of having control over what happens to our bodies. But it's also extremely important in terms of respecting other people's bodies and boundaries. When there is no consent, it is sexual assault, whether alcohol was present or not. And sexual assault is never the victim's fault. So it's extremely important that teens know that they are responsible for gaining consent if they are initiating a sexual act, no matter their gender or the gender of their partner. And alcohol can make it difficult to truly know if they are obtaining consent.
As the mom of 2 teenage daughters, one in high school and one in college, I know that it's really important to talk to them about consent on an ongoing basis. It really is a parent's responsibility to talk to their kids about consent, how to ask for it and how to give it. Although it might seem like a sensitive subject to talk about with teens, I find that there are a lot of ways you can do it without making it all about sex. There actually is a really great tool, which is a YouTube video called Consent is Like a Cup of Tea. This video is a great conversation starter, and it really uses humor to tackle the serious issue of consent. Having the conversation is important, and at the end of the day, our teens want to know that we care about them and their safety.
Parents of girls regularly talk with their daughters about how to be safe in dating and sexual situations, but parents of boys are less likely to have that conversation. Through my work at Wellspring, and as the mother of 2 boys, now grown men, I realize how important it is to have candid conversations with our sons about consent, about verifying that a partner is willing to engage in any activity and is able to consent. And we've got to be really specific and let them know that a partner who's highly intoxicated cannot give consent. It's also important that we support our sons in being that friend who speaks up or steps in when someone's crossing the line or when someone is in need. And it's equally important to let them know they have a right to consent to or decline any sexual activity. Don't leave this to your son to figure out on his own. He'll appreciate it if you have an open, candid conversation with him about how to navigate relationships safely and with confidence.
Consent is about more than sex. Talking to our children about consent is essentially talking to them about ownership over their bodies. And this discussion can begin long before adolescence. We have included links in our website that will help you learn more about consent and more about ways to talk about consent to your children at any age.